Shalom, everyone. We are here to talk about this year's sermon series, what we're going to be studying, what we're going to be looking at, why, and so on. So we're doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to ask Rabbi David exactly what the plan is so we can know what to expect. So Rabbi, how is what we're going to do this year different than what we've been doing the last few years?
How is this year different from all other years? Is that what you're... Sounds like a Passover question. So most years I preach on the Torah portion, with some exceptions, of course, based on what the Spirit inspired me to do. So that's usually from Genesis to Deuteronomy, from starting in the fall and from Rosh Hashanah. And then there's special readings for different holidays. But usually I preach on... So right now we would be in the book of Genesis. About to preach on, preaching through Jacob and then the story of Joseph and so on. So this year, I was inspired and excited to preach on the New Covenant portion. Now, the Torah portions are consistent throughout the Jewish world. Every other synagogue, Messianic or non, has the same reading. We're all on the same page, literally and figuratively. So if you went down the street to a different synagogue, they'd be reading from the same Torah portion. And if you went back in time, 100, 200 years on the same Hebrew date, it would be the same Torah portion, etc. And in Messianic Judaism, we have a New Covenant reading cycle also that goes mostly through one of the Gospels, and then there's special readings from the letters and such for the different holidays. And of course, there's also a Haftarah reading, which is from the prophets. And 1 year I preached through that, through the Haftarah reading. So we got a smattering of, Hosea and Isaiah and First Kings and things like that. And those relate thematically to the Torah portion. And then 1 year I preached through the New Covenant portions, which was mostly through the Gospel of John. And that was about 7 years ago. And so this year we're preaching through Matthew, mostly through the Gospel of Matthew, a little bit of Mark, and a little bit of other readings as it comes up. It mostly goes through the entire gospel.
So in a recent sermon, you mentioned some of the themes that we're going to be looking at. Can you remind us of those themes and maybe share why you think those themes were good things to explore this year?
So the Gospel of Matthew has a lot of cool things about it. It's the first book of the Newer Covenant, and it starts with the genealogy of Yeshua. It actually says this is in Greek, Genesis of Yeshua the Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. So it firmly places Yeshua within his Jewish context, which we always love to do. But the Gospel of Matthew does that consistently. And it always uses the phrase, this was to fulfill the scriptures, the Tanakh, the Hebrew writings, when Yeshua did this or that. And oftentimes it's a creative fulfillment. It's not exactly a word for word, or like when it says, out of Egypt I called my son. Matthew is referring to Yeshua as God's son, and in the original Hosea text, it's referring to Israel as God's son. So is it a contradiction? By no means, right? Because they're both the son of God. Israel is God's son. It's his firstborn son, as it says in Exodus, and Yeshua is the one man Israel. So he brings to fullness the story of Israel, and the Gospel of Matthew shows exactly that. It shows how he can be the Messiah, and so it has this dual nature to it. In some ways, it's exactly what you would expect, right? This is what we were expecting when the Messiah was to come. He was going to teach the Torah, he was going to heal Israel, he was going to deliver Israel from the evil one, and he was going to proclaim the good news. But in other ways, it's very, very surprising, and it's not what you would expect, because we all have different expectations about what the Messiah is and what the Messiah would do. And Yeshua fulfills that in some ways in an unexpected way, but it still makes sense. So it's really cool to see how Matthew shows that.
Is there a passage or section or chapter that you're really looking forward for us to get to that you're excited about?
Well, this week, actually, we're getting into Matthew 5, which is the famous Sermon on the Mount. It has what's called the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, etc. And it really, if you read into it, it's really a summary of the Torah, of the Hebrew Bible, but in an unexpected way, in an upside-down kingdom kind of way, which is very typical of Matthew, very typical of Yeshua, and it really leans heavily on the Torah. Other parts of the Sermon on the Mount deal with Torah observance, Shabbat observance. It's a very Jewish book. So what the Shabbat means, what it means to rest. And the religious leaders of Yeshua's day were very critical of how he observed Shabbat. But of course, he had the correct interpretation. Because Matthew reminds us that Yeshua spoke and taught with authority, right? And that authority comes from Hashem, because he is the living Torah, so he's able to give the correct halacha or interpretation. So it's got a lot of cool things. It has, in the very beginning, the phrase, the land of Israel. Whereas if you're reading quickly, you'll miss it in Matthew 2. But I spoke on this a few weeks ago, how that is integral to the story, the narrative of the gospel, that it takes place in the land of Israel, that it's called the land of Israel in the Greek text. And so those are some really cool Jewish things about Matthew, and also shows how Yeshua shares an identity with the one God of Israel, and is his divine nature as well, the authority that he has, the focus on the lost sheep of the house of Israel, the focus on Jewish oaths and purity laws and matters of Torah. So it goes back to the creation story, it goes back to the Torah. And a lot of times when I preach, I'm preaching from the Torah forward, right? I preach through, let's say, Deuteronomy, and then I'll get to the Gospels forward. But this year, I have the opportunity to start in Matthew and then show where the roots of that lay in the Hebrew Bible. So it's a cool kind of different way of thinking, and I'm actually learning a lot as I'm researching and processing this, preparing.
Great. What are specific takeaways that you are hoping that we can get over, the course of the year?
I think overall, my hope is that our community would have an understanding of what the good news is, and the Jewishness of the text, the Jewishness of the gospel, the Jewishness of Yeshua, and how Yeshua is the fullness of Israel and the fullness of the God of Israel, and how he brings those two together. And to see the Jewish background, to see the underlying Torah that supports this text, and see all those connections. For example, a lot of people don't know that in the Beatitudes, he says, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land, they will inherit the earth." And that's a direct quote from Psalm 37. So he's not creating some new Torah, right? He's actually bringing forth the original Torah, but in a new way, and writing it on our hearts. So this is the hope of Israel. This is the Tikvat Israel that we have, and that's what I want to bring out. And also, the hope is that it's not just an interesting book, but it's a book that changes our hearts. It's a book that changes our lives, because it's the gospel. And so that's my ultimate hope, that encountering the one man Israel, encountering Yeshua in the Gospels, we would be transformed.
Okay, with all of that being said, is there anything else you would like to, plug into our podcast listeners, the people that attend, everybody that is looking forward to the sermon series of 5786?
Yes. Well, thank you. I just want to extend an invitation. It's great to listen to the podcast. It's great to join us online. But if you're able to come in person, we'd love to have you. Everyone is invited. Everyone is welcome to come worship with us, and that includes you. And so we'd love to have you come worship with us as we study through the whole book of Matthew and get a richer understanding of it. And I hope to see you there on this Shabbat or a subsequent Shabbat very soon. And thanks for listening. And may the Torah be with you.